First, we were told that practice makes perfect. And then they told us that perfect practice makes perfect. But it turns out they were wrong. And in fact, according to the latest research, perfect practice may actually be the worst way to learn a new skill. Because what we need isn't perfect practice, but instead practice that is riddled with errors. So how did we get this so wrong? And why are mistakes such an important way to fast track our skill development? Well, whether we're talking about learning a complex exercise like learning a musical instrument or learning to walk for the first time or learning Olympic weightlifting, it comes down to two things: attention and neuroplasticity. Now, the first of these two is pretty simple. Attention, it's just our ability to focus on a certain task. If we want to get a little more technical with this, it's our ability to focus our attention on a sensory event. Now, this sensory event may be something we see, like hitting the bullseye on a dartboard, something we hear, like striking the correct keys on a piano, or something we feel, like the position of our body in a highly technical exercise like Olympic weightlifting. So that's our attention, but the neuroplasticity, it's a little more complex. This talks about our brain's ability to change itself. So if you can imagine for a moment that you stretch a rubber band. As you let it go, it springs right back to its original length. This is because the band has what in physics we call an elastic property. Now imagine you're stretching a piece of cling wrap. As you let it go, it remains changed in length. It remains deformed and it changes to this new length. And in physics, we call this a plastic property. Our brain isn't elastic like the rubber band, it's plastic like the cling wrap. And when the brain learns something new, it retains that new skill. All of these nerves and neurons in our brain start to connect together to form these superhighways, to form these skill pathways. Our brain changes itself. So neuroplasticity is a good thing. It allows us to learn, it allows us to adapt. So we talked about both the need for attention and the need for this neuroplasticity. In fact, what happens is the attention leads to this neuroplasticity. If we give our focus to a new skill, we improve our ability to learn that skill. And here's the key. This is the key point. We need errors to cause us to focus our attention. These errors focus our attention, the focused attention leads to neuroplasticity, and neuroplasticity is what develops a new skill. So how does this all work? What can we do with this information? Well, as you make an error, maybe you're striking the wrong key on a piano or you're losing your balance when performing a snatch in Olympic weightlifting, it causes a certain part of your brain to turn on, a certain part of your brain to activate. Now, crucially, this is the exact part of your brain that heightens attention. So, doing this error is sending a signal to your brain that something needs to change, and it needs to change so that same error isn't going to happen again. So not only are these errors okay, they actually create the perfect optimal conditions for neuroplasticity. The errors are a vital part of the learning process. The more errors that you make, the more signals your brain receives, and the more we can create these favorable changes in our nervous system. Making lots of errors is important, and lots of errors can only come from high repetition of the skill. So the perfect environment to create a new skill is very high repetition of that skill in a short amount of time. So we need to allocate a finite period, a short amount of time to repeated practice. We need to perform the skill again and again and again. We need to make those errors again and again and again. This is the best way to fast track our learning, because the more mistakes you make, the more we can focus our attention on the skill and the more plastic the change in our brain will become. And eventually, when you've missed enough bullseyes on the dartboard or dropped enough barbells or fallen over enough times, you'll perform the skill correctly. And when you do perform that skill correctly, something special and something really important happens. Your brain starts to release a reward chemical, and this chemical is called dopamine. This dopamine causes that little internal fist pump, that good feeling that you get when you achieve something you've been working hard at. Now, not only does dopamine make you feel good, but it also consolidates the skill you've just achieved. It locks it into your brain. So what can teachers and coaches learn from this updated thinking around learning? Well, first, we can flip our outdated perspective of what makes a good coach. We normally think of a good teacher as someone who provides constant feedback. And although this is really important for the student to be able to identify where their errors are, it has to be balanced out with time where the learner can make their own mistakes without this constant feedback. Overcoaching actually prevents this neuroplasticity, and it can slow down the learning process, the exact opposite of what we're trying to achieve. So giving people time to make mistakes allows the errors to tell them what to focus on. And remember, more focus equals more attention equals neuroplasticity equals learning. So how can someone looking to learn a new skill use this information to fast track their progress? Well, here are 4 simple steps. Step 1, cram as many reps as possible into a period of time where you can maintain focus. Step 2, make sure you're paying attention to the errors that you make. Step 3, celebrate when you perform the skill correctly. That hit of dopamine will cement that skill in your brain. And step 4, after you've done this intense bout of practice, do nothing for a while. It helps the mind replay that skill, which will then further help the learning process. And of course, prioritizing sleep will do a very similar thing. And if you're a teacher or a coach, try not to be so quick to jump in to make these corrections. You need to give your students time to work it out for themselves. Perfect practice doesn't make perfect. Imperfect practice makes perfect.